All right, Big 12 Media Days today at the Roomba, home of this past Super Bowl in Las Vegas. 4 new teams are in it. Dion is there. Ollie Gordon is there. KU, K-State, all there. So football season is right around the corner. Big 10 Media Days are in a couple of weeks, where you'll find with the host of Husker 24/7 crew, Brian Christopherson. He joins us now. Good morning, BC.
Good morning, guys. How are you?
Good. When you told me you were on vacation, I had a request. Did we bring back any walleye for the room?
I didn't catch one walleye. Fishing was slow up there in our lake. The biggest news item personally was I think I joined like the pickleball cult of America. My brother's been playing, and he set up kind of a makeshift court. It was a little smaller than standard size. Sorry to the real pickleballers out there offended by that, but we had to do with what we had. And so we got pretty intense about it throughout the week, and there's no question I'm probably going to head over and get a racket at some point this week. And I was one of those people who was always like kind of eyes glazed over whenever someone would bring up their pickleball stories, and now I feel like I get it. I understand why it pulls in. So I'm in it.
If you have a strength, though, would you say backhand, forehand? Where do you seem to thrive? What can you really base your game off of?
I really don't know if I have a strength or weakness yet where I'd say this is way better than the other thing. I think I was pretty solid about, just falling and keeping it going. But where I was getting owned was my brother would set up shop just outside the kitchen, which I learned was a term by like on day 2. I didn't even know that the first day. So I got to learn how to play around the kitchen much better to have a shot or to clear people out of the kitchen, I guess. I don't know. I'm probably saying stuff that's silly to a longtime player, but I'm learning. I got some lessons. I did stretch my brother into some competitive games, even though I never got a victory.
Can we discuss the fact that your favorite baseball team only got one All-Star for a team that has the 7th best record in baseball?
My boys are always overlooked. They've had a weird kind of season where I think I'm a follower of them, and sometimes I've been like, man, this season kind of stinks. Like it's felt like they've had these streaks, but they've also had these times where they've won like 6 or 7 in a row, and you look up and they're like 52-39 now. I mean, it's because the Guardians have played so well that I guess it's felt like to me sometimes like, man, this isn't going to plan.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we should have had more than one guy. You know who it sounds weird to say, but Twins fans were arguing for is Willie Castro was having a pretty darn good first half. And he's one of those, how every year there's a player who's like, what the stinks he doing on the roster? Like Willie Castro maybe could have been that guy for the Twins. But yeah, Carlos Correa got on, so I know all the Correa Astros haters won't like that, but we had to have somebody, and he's our guy.
Hey, as a Guardians fan, you guys have my attention more than anything right now, especially if you guys get to full strength as well and continue to just match 26 home run. Was it 26 game home run hitting streak right now too? So you keep doing you. Don't worry. At some point, I'm sure Shafe says the same thing. The other shoe will fall for our beloved Cleveland baseball team, and here you guys will be right there on the doorstep.
Well, we'll see if Jose Miranda can just keep hitting everything in sight. Like right now, it's like a flying saucer to him up there. He's just smacking everything. But and then we got Brooks Lee coming up, young rookie. Yeah. And I know I'm boring people with my Twins talk, but Brooks Lee, any guy named Brooks, I feel like has a good. Like if you want your kid to have a shot at a baseball career, throw that name Brooks on him. Brooksy. There's a good chance he's going to have something. He'll at least be like a second-team All-Stater in high school with that name, I think.
Let's shift to a little football because everybody goes on vacation and things happen. That's how the news cycle works. John Butler, we think it'll be made official today. He's already in Lincoln. His first couple of things that he has to tackle will be what?
I suppose it's always like when the timetable is like this with a short runway, it's just like building that trust as fast as you can with guys, getting them in your office, them getting to know you and how you're going to operate a little bit. You don't want to jump right to some of those conversations, but you got to have those easy first conversations to ease people in. And then you're going to have to pretty quickly develop that type of relationship where guys know what you're saying comes from the heart and they can believe in it and vice versa. So you got to start working on that immediately. And then I suppose the other thing is, I don't know what Tony White's vacation plans were this summer, but obviously, even though John Butler is a veteran coach, you've got to get on the same page and have an understanding of sort of how you're operating in certain ways and things that you're going to have to talk over there. So I have to think those are the biggest priorities. I wrote about this over the weekend, how Tony White, we knew was a big deal coming back. Obviously, it's an even bigger deal now because he's just got that temperament and sort of ability to listen and get feedback from another coach and then explain his process well to people, that I think can help when you're kind of in a little bit of a time crunch, even though obviously John Butler is, got a big time resume. I mean, he's been coaching for decades. Still, there's always that adjustment when you're in a new place and new language and everybody does things a little differently. So they got to get on the same page. But I think Tony White's just style and the way he communicates, and most importantly, the way we've heard that he listens, I think is a big deal right now.
It's a good point, BC, because I would agree that that's going to be an interesting transition from the standpoint of not necessarily. I'd like to think, whether it's a 3-3-5, a 4-3, a 5-2, whatever you're running, I would like to think that if you know the secondary and how it's going to operate, it's probably going to be interchangeable in a lot of defenses. But I think you bring up an interesting point. Is it not necessarily maybe not being as familiar with the 3-3-5 more than it would be just the overall verbiage and what guys are used to in that room on how Evan Cooper communicated?
I mean, I think it's the verbiage and just, that it's like that. You probably have easy terms that one coach had that everybody was on the same page with. And now you got to get up to speed with another guy and him doing the same thing or him knowing those terms. What really helps this process is there is an interesting battles for like Nebraska's too deep in the secondary. But when you look at the top line, you've got 4 or 5 guys that, I know this phrase gets thrown around a lot, the high football IQ guys, but they've got them back there. I mean, Isaac Gifford is the bulldog of that defense to me, like on all levels. And so you've got him in your room, and you've got Tommy Hill, who everybody's hoping is on the cusp of a really consistent, all Big Ten type of season. And then Marquise Buford, Deshaun Singleton, these are guys who know their stuff. Like Marquise Buford has impressed 2 different coaching staffs with how quickly he picks stuff up. And so I feel like that can help, is that, going in, you've at least got some veterans who are kind of in betweens with the other guys that can help a new coach. So that's going to be a big deal, I would think.
How soon do you think you'll know that this defense is better than they were last year?
I think Colorado's going to be a tough test. We can wonder about certain things and how they run their organization sometimes, but you can't deny that they're going to have some good skill, really good skill guys. I mean, Shadour's a really good quarterback. His personality might not be for everybody, but he's definitely got the goods, and he's going to test your secondary. And he's not, even though Nebraska got to him and actually sacked him quite a bit last year, he's a guy that can be elusive back there and extend some stuff. And so I really do think that week 2 game will be a decent barometer for this defense. But they just have to really go into camp. And I liked how they talked in the spring about, like, whatever happened last year, it's not like an iPhone where you get a new one and that data just moves over to the other one. You can't, whatever your top 10 stats were last year, you're nothing right now. And you got to look at it that way. you can have confidence and believe in, the system better and what you're going to get done. But you also know that you haven't done anything yet, and you're going to have to put in the work each day with a slightly different look at certain spots than you had a season ago. Like Omar Brown was a really important player, and obviously Reimer and some of those guys who were veterans mattered. So other guys have to step into roles and really make it a focus of I'm not going to be part of the group that lets this thing drop off. We're going to start a tradition here of being that type of top 10, top 15 defense every year, and let's roll with it.
BC, I know athletic directors have that list in their desk if something were to happen to their head coach, that they would be able to move forward and hopefully have a seamless transition. I know that coaches, especially the ones worth their salt, are always going to have a contingency plan on just about everything. But what you've learned from Matt Rule over the last 72 hours of this whole situation with Evan Cooper and being able to transition into what seems to be a more than capable replacement, what characteristic about Matt Rule stands out in all of this?
That he's always forward thinking, and for the most part, I don't think that he's going to get caught too off balance. Even if you do get thrown a curveball, he's been around it long enough to understand, even if you don't know when the pitch is coming or what that pitch exactly is going to be, it is going to happen at some point. And like you said, you do have to have a list of people that you might consider if this happened or that happened, even if there's a day in March where you're not even thinking about it. Like, you still have that, in your desk, as you say, or in your mind, like, I could go this way or I could go that way if that domino fell. Mm-hmm. And I feel like he must have some of that, because if this goes through as we think it will, I'm not guaranteeing anything for what they're going to do in the secondary, but you would all have to say, you look at John Butler's resume. I mean, this was a guy who was right in the running to be the Buffalo Bills defensive coordinator. I mean, he's right there. And, obviously was a trusted guy with Penn State and the Houston Texans before that. He's got a very complete resume that is going to get players' attention. They're going to respect it right away. And the fact that, I think Rule has some pull because he's thought of as one of those coaches who's very detailed. And he's also a coach who's been in the NFL, and, he's been at all levels. And I think that's probably appealing to guys like John Butler who have bounced between college and pro. So there's a lot of things that work to the benefit for Rule just from his background, I think, that is appealing. And then the resources of Nebraska, let's not kid ourselves. You can probably put in front of a coach a pretty substantial offer that has to at least make him go to his family and think, let's talk this over. This looks like a pretty good situation. And we can't deny or be naive to the fact, I'm not trying to Tony White could be here 4 years for all I know. We always act like it's going to be next year. Who knows what's going to happen? It's got to be the right, job that opens for him to move on from here. He's got a good situation now. But obviously, if you're a coach looking in, you're saying, there could be an opportunity at some point to be in the running as a coordinator here down the road. And that has to be at least something that a guy writes down on a piece of paper when he's considering what to do with a job like this.
Brian Christopherson from Husker 24/7 joining us. Let's shift to the NIL and the announcement yesterday. And it's kind of, Nebraska athletics in 1890 are now together. And hopefully it'll super beneficial. But it's, since Dannon got here, he's embraced it. The gear is out there. But people are still trying to figure it out, and especially the news yesterday of, do you take the points or do you take the tax deduction? Everybody's trying to figure that out, and we all are in here in 3 years trying to figure out how this works. And are you winning? Are you losing? How is a coach embracing it? How much of an impact do you think it would make, BC, if a guy like Dylan Raiola was a promotional piece for 1890, and he basically said, if it wasn't for 1890, I'm not here? What kind of an impact do you think that would have on the donor base?
If there's a player where that's from his heart and that's his statement that is true and he believes in, I see no problem with that. And I do think it could help you a little bit. To what degree, I could obviously not say. But obviously, I think Nebraska does well, but you're fighting battles with, let's face it, Oregon and Ohio State. I mean, they've got pretty big money pots. So I mean, whatever you can do to increase your reach with that is good. We obviously knew when Troy Dannon first got here, he was going to make it a central piece of the athletic department. He said that like in his fifth or sixth question that he'd wear 1890 gear as much as, you'd probably see it on him as much as his Husker gear. So when you see announcements like yesterday, I don't think it surprised people. In fact, I think there were a few people who were like, I thought that was already sort of, like, I think people don't like it is. You're right. This is like, remember in college when you'd have a teacher, I don't know if you had this, where they'd give you like 5 possible essay questions that might be in the test, and you would maybe go study 1 or 2, but there were like 2 or 3 you didn't know as well. I feel like the NIL component for a lot of people, including me, is like that hazy 4th question where you're like, man, I kind of hope there's not a lot I have to say about that on the test sometimes, because it is hard to sometimes get your arms around like how every piece of it works and who's doing it really well and where does Nebraska rank and all that. But I think you make a good point, Gary, with just like however you can do to influence people locally, like, yeah, you can be a part of this, you can help it. And this particular big time player was impacted by it. That certainly can help.
Well, and I think Gary brings up a great question. If someone like Dylan Raiola says that, or any of your high-end recruits say that, because we've always had this conversation, and now that the stadium project maybe isn't as much of a conversation as it was when Trev was here, or even when they're transitioning to Troy Dannon, but if you were a donor that wanted to impact this football program, that you're more likely to donate to a stadium project or to NIL. I think for what Gary asks, if you have a guy like that comes out and says, hey, this is why I came here. I mean, I like the school. Obviously, everybody knows my kid, the family connection, but it came down to they just are very forward thinking, very progressive, and there's a lot of opportunity here for NIL. I almost think it's a no-brainer that even some of the people that look a little bit further down the road on what's best for this football program is still going to look at the NIL. I hesitate to think that there's going to be a lot of people, unless you're in a position financially that you can do both. I think it's probably 70-30 that people are going NIL over stadium projects.
Yeah, you might be right on that. And I continue, we've always asked this question with recruiting, right? Like, what would happen if they actually won 9 games, 2 consecutive seasons again? And like, how would that, change the equation? I get choked up, emotional talking about it. It's like such a deep thought, as you can tell. But I mean, we could ask that same question about the NIL. Like, what would that mean to like people who are donating to stadium stuff to the NIL, fund? If the wins started piling up more, people have been very charitable considering Nebraska's track record recently. You'd have to say more than like I think about any other program in the country, and I don't think anybody in Nebraska's administration takes that for granted. And you see Matt Rule with the video like Sunday. I think it was Sunday. I was coming back from the lake, but it was like, now it's our time, right? Like, it all works together. There's an understanding. Like, these people they've been loyal. They've been given stuff even when times have been lean. It is now that moment where you got to strike and you got to win a few more ball games, and all the stuff we're talking about. Then it lifts. The water goes up. You're gonna get more funding from people and stuff like that when they see the more wins. But yeah, it's a really interesting conversation, and sometimes the details are elusive when it comes to NIL, and yet it's probably one of the most important things that's going to decide if you win or lose at this level now. So that's why it's such a weird topic, because it means so much, and yet sometimes it's foggy, like who's doing it really well and how do you do it really well.
Hey, we appreciate your time. Welcome back from vacation. I'll miss the nature videos, but I'm glad you're back.
Yeah, the trumpet swan, loon. I was trying to here.
Yeah.
That's why my voice is like that. I was doing loon calls on the lake, so you got to forgive me a bit.
Well,
anyway,
I've sent it to CBS Sunday Morning, so maybe they'll use it at the end of their show.
That does seem like something that would get on that show. Actually, yeah, that's a very inside